of the colonial project was the dismantling of African history and the imposition of a history that suits and serves the interests of colonizers. And many of us today still exist as Black African people on the basis of colonial histories. Yeah, one example of this is the idea of Africa being a dark continent of warring tribes perpetually throughout the ages who had no form of unity or relationship with each other and didn't interact until the Europeans came, right? And a lot of this is imposed on African people today, and that's why we feel like there are no foundations, there is no basis, yeah, for African unity, because we've always been warring tribes. And so one of the things that Pan-Africanism or Pan-African scholars within the tradition have aimed to do is rewrite the history according to the truth, yeah, and according to from an African perspective. Sister Omotayo continues, the ideals of Pan-Africanism may therefore be phrased in summative terms as the emancipation of Black people in all locations and possibly the political unification of African countries and the creation of a home in Africa for all African people. This point is important, and she says possibly political unification, because it would be true to say that there are some, differences and nuances in terms of that idea. But it's important because the Africa as currently constituted, yeah, is the result of the Berlin Conference, which took place in 1884 and 1885, an event at which European nations sat around a table, yeah, namely Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, Germany, and Spain, yeah, and and a couple others had observer status, yeah, at this particular conference, right? And the Berlin Conference is where they literally sat down a table and carved up the continent for their own purposes, because they were in the process of conquering various different groups of people to commandeer and institute colonialism. Yeah, and so all of the borders that we see on the continent today are developed by colonizers. Yeah, and so these little states are considered to be economically unviable because they were created for the purpose of facilitating colonialism. And so in order to, shed the shackles of neocolonialism, we have to do something about how our nations are configured right about now. And we can best protect ourselves unified as a nation of people in terms of how we relate to the rest of the world, just as the West operates as a bloc, yeah, and various other configurations operate as a bloc. It's necessary for us to do that today as well, all right? Sister Omotayo continues, cultural movements within Pan-Africanism, notably negritude and Afrocentricity, seek both the political and cultural validation of Africa by encouraging and documenting the development of Black or African cultural values and Africa-derived aesthetic usages in art forms by people of African descent. Yeah, that explains itself. I'm not going to go into it too much, but just to say that out of this, when you talk about aesthetics, yeah, beauty, this is one of the major features. One of the first things that all Black power movements and liberation movements have done have had a strong principle and a strong focus on identity. That is why, yeah, you have, dance forms and speech forms and language and fashion, yeah, and hairstyles and language associated with Pan-Africanism, Afro, locks, yeah, traditional African attire. It's the reason why Africans who were part of the enslavement process, and even Africans who were on the continent and part of the colonial process, who had European names imposed upon us, yeah, reject those European names and refer to them as colonial names or slave names and reclaim our African names as an act, yeah, of self determination. It's the reason why African garms is a staple, yeah, within Pan-African communities, right? It's the reason why we've challenged Eurocentric forms of beauty, light skin and straight hair as the epitome of beauty, and pushed forward and promoted dark skin and woolly hair, our own natural hair, as definitive expressions of who we are, to challenge the colonial imposition. These are all aspects, and some of these expressions are ridiculed today, yeah, but they were very important in terms of the Pan-African movement, or the black nationalists or African nationalist movement, responding to and throwing off the shackles of indoctrination, of colonialism and neo-colonialism. Also, yeah, when we deal with the cultural, there's a spiritual inclination, yeah, understanding the role that spirituality plays in culture and in general, and African culture in particular. So a lot of Pan-Africanists have questioned, yeah, our religious inclinations and sought to restore dignity and pride, yeah, to indigenous African culture that we were taught was savage and barbaric from a civilizational perspective, and also pagan, heathen, kuffar, yeah, and infidel from a religious inclination. And so because culture is seen by many Pan-Africanists, especially coming out of an Afrocentric tradition, as the primary, yeah, field of human activity, the cultural is very important. And I'm made to understand that brother elder Molefe Kete Asante is actually writing a book on Afrocentric Pan-Africanism, so look out for that when it comes out. A final and important point to make here is that Pan-Africanist ideology stresses unity in diversity. Simply put, you can be Yoruba, Igbo, Ashanti, Ga, Somali, Kikuyu, Bakongo, Luo, Shona, Nguni, Osa, Kalenjin, Nuer, wherever it is, brothers and sisters, yeah, all of our African is African and can be unified as an understanding of Africanness. You don't have to discard any one of those things, yeah, in terms of your own particular lineage and heritage. Yeah, all of it contributes to what it means to be African. Also, however, yeah, if you are an African coming out of the experience in Jamaica, in Haiti, in Belize, in Guatemala, in Trinidad, in Barbados, in St. Lucia, in Dominica, in Cuba, in Brazil, yeah? All of this also contributes to what it means to be African. Your African is no less African than the African on the continent, yeah? And there is power in reclaiming the retentions that we've kept and understanding them as African, even our languages, our patois, our Creole, our Ebonics, yeah? Understanding it within its African context and unifying on those bases. That's it for this edition of the Pan-African question. I hope you appreciate why I had to do, a third part to this specific question. Are you a Pan-Africanist? If you have a question, yeah, pertaining to Pan-African thought, theory, practice, and strategy that you feel needs to be highlighted and answered, drop it in the comment section below. If you want to add to the information, yeah, and even challenge some of the information that I've shared today, drop all of that in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to keep up and respond to it all. Family, stay tuned. Yeah, stay tuned for more of the Pan-African question next week. Tendai Mwari. Be thankful unto the Most High, Mother, Father, Creator of the universe. Kudzai, Mwazeo Mokodo, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, African liberation and African power for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.